Welcome, everyone, to the Praecepta Podcast. My name is Stephen Naylor. I'm joined by my co-host, Andy Johnsonin. Praecepta is the new music organization at Bowling Green State University. And this particular podcast is coming up in preparation for Praecepta's mini New Music Fest, which is upcoming in late March. And we're all super pumped around it for it over here. A couple of our guests at this festival are the incredible Andrew Martin Smith and Jamie Leigh Sampson, who are joining us on the podcast today.
Hello.
Hi.
I'll give brief bios for each, and then we can get into some questions. Andrew Martin Smith is a composer, clarinetist, and entrepreneur based in Western New York, currently a senior adjunct lecturer at the State University of New York at Fredonia. He is also a faculty member at Interlochen Arts Camp, having previously served as an adjunct instructor at Bowling Green State University and Owens Community College. And Jamie Leigh Sampson is a composer, bassoonist, author, teacher, and entrepreneur based in Western New York. She currently teaches music composition, theory, and entrepreneurship in the School of Music at SUNY Fredonia. We're delighted to have you both. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having us.
So excited to be here.
So, on the topic of this festival coming up, this is the first time that we're doing anything like this here, a whole mini New Music Festival in itself. In a lot of ways, this festival is a big BGSU homecoming bash. You are both alums of BG. I'd love to start out this conversation with what's one core memory that you both have from your time here at BG?
I'm gonna get in so much trouble tonight.
You're gonna get in trouble. I see so when I don't know if this is a core memory or a foundational memory or a formative memory, but I have to say that time I was chased around the pond by those geese, that was memorable.
Oh my gosh. The one time we let them outside. I mean, guys. Oh, I mean, there are so very many. And I think one of the moments that I don't remember, but I know has had a huge impact on me is we met some of our best friends there. Look at this, I'm already getting emotional. This was the first time I was in a program with some really like-minded women who are still supporting me to this day. I have a group chat with just two of my very closest, and they know exactly who they are, and so does everyone who went to school with us. Two of my very closest friends. We group chat every single day. And I met them, day 2, day 3 of orientation and classes. And so, finding a support system that is still in place has been fantastic. And we run into other BGSU alumni everywhere. We ran into somebody at Midwest, and they were like, "Hi, nice to meet Jamie," and that's kind of how it goes with BG. We're spread out in a huge web across the country, and it's necessary and important. And that's not a specific core memory, but my gosh, I think it's one of the most important ones.
Yeah, see, I'm kind of having an issue pinning down core memory. They're more or less grouped as kind of both of you probably know. You have these all of these associative kind of memories with particular events or places, like centering around new music festivals, for example, like a boatload of memories associated there. For me, I think the biggest takeaway I got from my time at BGSU, hands down, involved the amount of teaching opportunities I had. So having the opportunity to kind of mentor with, folks like Clint Fox and Gene Trantham and Bill Lake, I got some pretty intense, relatively rigorous theory pedagogy chops coming out of BGSU, which was fantastic. So a lot of my really, really kind of formative memories in music pedagogical kind of areas come from my time at the College of Musical Arts.
Yeah, I'm with Professor Fox right now, and him and Dr. Decker have been very transformative in how I've been teaching music theory and oral skills.
Yeah, they're both delightful individuals, both very, very mindful of pedagogy. I was more or less a colleague of Greg's because I was in the midst of the doctoral program when he first came on. And it was a lot of fun teaching kind of tandemly courses with him. And to tell Clint I say hi, see if he remembers.
Will do.
You know
I
what we
think I'll
didn't
see him
mention
tomorrow
though?
morning.
Sorry. You know what we didn't mention, and this is weird because we both lived there, was the library. I know, right? We were both graduate
This is what
supervisors.
I mean, though.
No,
They're grouped around events.
Yes, definitely. But we lived basically on the third floor of the library on weekends because we're both graduate supervisors, and my assistantship was working on the bibliography class, which still echoes into what I've taught this year at Fredonia. I think probably every time one of us came in for a supervising shift, the other one came in to study. So the last booth on the right is mine. Just to be clear. It better be empty next week.
We'll make sure. Hey, well, did you see Jerome Library was just named like the top 11th library like for universities in America?
Yes.
I did not.
Very well deserved, I think.
Not surprising. Yeah.
It's not. I love it. Of all of the articles Andrew shares every day on Facebook, I must have missed that one.
This.
I mean, to be fair, I do share a lot of articles. So if I did share one associated with that, it's probably buried by like, I don't know, like memes of music theory stuff or something. The library, such a fascinating place, especially when I think my first experience with the music library and the pop culture library kind of came through the lens of working with Bill Shirk, right? And so that like his office was a fascinating environment, just with how much it's a treatise on how much stuff can be fit into a small amount of space. It was
without the fire
phenomenal.
marshal telling him to clean it.
Well, yeah, I don't know how that happened, but being around all of the sound recordings archives, that was kind of my gateway into working with the library, was kind of beginning the process of cataloging all of the things that kind of came in through acquisitions. So that was an eye-opening experience that actually kind of I was exposed to like these random operas, like this Beowulf opera that there was only one recording of ever, it seems, and it just came. There's weird things that kind of came across my desk.
Wasn't Leonard Bernstein's Peter Pan also back there? And
yeah,
it was buried in a pile. And
right?
I came into the shift one day, and he's listening to music, and the text is like, "Eat blood, drink blood, dream blood." And I'm like, "What are you listening to?"
Aria,
like,
man.
Leonard Bernstein. No, it can't possibly be.
Wow, it's music I've never heard of, at least, and we learn more from you two every day.
I don't. You're welcome? Question mark.
I'll take it. So I'd like to pivot to some more of our tech savvy things. You're both very tech savvy people. Nifty software on Andrew's website, and Jamie, we're going to perform your laptop orchestra piece on Saturday at the mini festival, and we're really excited to dive into whatever that world is of laptop orchestra, if anybody knows what it is. But I'd like to ask how you got started in technology, and how much of your world is in technology and in your music now too.
I'm going to make you go.
Do you want to
first.
start? Okay.
No, I
right.
really don't.
Okay, so I think really getting into music tech started in undergrad, and it was a really basic class for me. This was the course that taught us how to use Finale, but not Sibelius, which was weird. At the time, there was like this digital resume type of program that I really loved.
HyperCard,
yeah. We both created digital resumes in HyperCard, and no one has been able to read them since. Yeah, there was no way to send it to anybody because it was like a standalone program that it was fascinating. But that class taught me a lot and I had a lot of fun in it. I think it was a standalone class, so I don't remember if it was even 2 semesters. There was a Max class. I don't think I got the chance. Oh, I definitely didn't get the chance to take it there.
I don't think it was mostly Max, because I think it was primarily synthesis. And I think it was like old school synthesis when Keith Peterson was teaching it at Fredonia. I'm pretty sure. I mean, we still have the Moog that Paul Coleman still uses for demos in synthesis. But I'm pretty sure there wasn't, it was more about MIDI manipulation and sound synthesis than it was about any kind of live musical programming.
I'm 100% sure there was some Max in it though, because yesterday a fellow alumni in IT told me so.
Oh, that's hilarious. I love it.
He's installing Max for me on my work computer now because it has to be part of the laptop orchestra premiere or performance at Fredonia 2 weeks after the festival. So we need Max on as many laptops in this building as we can get them on. So he did tell me it was there, but yeah, really it was kind of intro level. My absolute favorite thing, and this goes into my later obsession with notation and being a self-publisher and all of the nerdiness that we do now with making our scores look publish ready. My favorite assignment in that class was he handed us a sheet of music and he said, get as close as possible to what this looks like, but in finale. And I went on an obsessive craze looking for the font that publisher used. That's not what he meant. That's not what he meant at all. But I did get a really high score. I was
going to say your score looked pretty impressive.
It was great. It was great. I loved that much more than my listening for 7th chord assignment that I also had to do that week. You know, I am font nerdy. It's very intense. But since then, I went to BG, took 3 semesters of music tech with Tim Stolman, Andrea Rankemeyer, and Dr. Lilios. And then my 4th semester, I was double duty, bassoon and comp, because I'm always double duty because there's not enough bassoonists in the world. So my 4th semester, I did not get to complete the more advanced Max program, which now I think more than anything, Dr. Robert McClure finds annoying because he's the one I call when I have a problem. And he handed me a textbook not too long ago and said, please, relearn with all the love in the world.
I'm in the midst of that class right now, and it is so much fun.
It is so much fun, and it is so nice to have a book that reminds me of how to do things right. So now in my day-to-day, the laptop orchestra piece is actually kind of a return for me. I was asked to write it by Ensemble Decipher. They are recent graduates of, I believe, I'm going to get this wrong. It's either Stony Brook or Purchase. They're part of the SUNY system. They won one of the first SUNY prizes for performance curation and creativity. And they commissioned 10 new pieces from SUNY professors and students at each of 5 schools that they were going to see on a tour. So I wrote a piece along with one of our students, Julian Zhang, and they premiered those at Fredonia in November. And so I had a, rapid fire relearning of Max, as I like to call it. And I've done some fixed media pieces as well, but other than that, I am largely, my technological involvement is usually on the notation side of things. So that's not to say this is the end. I keep getting yelled at to come back to Seamus and to come back to EMM. It's not just you, it's also McClure. And last time I saw her, Dr. Lilios, thank you. I listened. Took a while, but I listened. And so yeah, it's working its way back in. I'm sure there will be other pieces because now we have enough of a laptop orchestra set up that I must make it worth it.
So, I mean, I feel like, and anybody on this, feel free to correct me if you think I'm wrong, but technology is one of these things, since it is ever evolving and very quickly, I'm always feeling like I have to relearn something. like the thing that I loved about BG and the things that I learned at Fredonia, music tech wise and in a variety of areas, was kind of the like fundamentals, like, you know, like going through the Curtis Rhodes, like that tome of a thing, and just like, oh God, like much of this is not
Stephen. Yes.
Of course he has it.
Love it.
Of course.
Of course.
It used to be in this room too. We moved it downstairs about 3 months ago.
Yeah. And much of this can be practical in certain circumstances. Also in the roads, of course, there are things that are more or less obsolete because technology changes. Certain things that were considerations before don't necessarily need to be considerations now. And it's just mind-boggling how those advances might seem to trip people up in terms of like wanting to create using various technologies. And I think I've gotten to the point now where I always assume there's probably a better way to do something that I'm currently doing. I could try and find that perfect way to do it now, or I can finish the piece. And then once the piece is finished, I might go back and revise. That's kind of the mode that I'm in right now. So when I encounter new technologies or streamlined workflow or any of these kinds of things, that's kind of what I do that's kind of what I keep in mind nowadays, is that I am not in a position to be like on the cutting edge of technological research, especially since I try to live in both the acoustic and the electroacoustic realms like Jamie. And so, you know, I'm basically splitting my time 50-50 between acoustic pieces that I'm writing and electronic pieces that I'm writing. And I just don't feel like I have the time or energy to be the absolute like most cut. I'm not gonna like, you know, take a squirrel and put on some kind of weird like sensor jacket and map data from its travel. I can't right now. I can't. And I am no longer interested in soldering anything.
Other than the squirrel, your description of this actually made me think of like the way we learn technology is at the same time. I distinctly remember being in grad school and being like, I'm never going to be like my grandparents who refuse to use new technology. Let me rephrase. My grandfather was a visual artist. He's a painter. He was interested in learning how to use computers and the application in the visual arts. And my grandmother told him no, and that was the end of it. And so I think that's really sad, because he could have done some really cool stuff later in his life. But there's this huge learning curve too. And so hearing you describe this, Andrew, is actually reminding me that there is some technology that I'm like, yeah, I'm never going to get far behind in. I will always have an iPhone, I'm sure. There's other stuff where I'm like, well, that's the steepest learning curve I've ever seen in my life. And that's what I think it's a little restrictive with me, is just because we split our time between these worlds. Sometimes I look at the daunting learning curve and I get a little, I'll come back to you. I'm going to come back. This hill is here. I don't need to run it today.
It's me and granular right now. Yeah.
Same.
So speaking of BG stories and memories, and maybe some people can relate to this. One of the teachers that I studied with for the longest in my kind of pedigree was Michael Keene. 6.5-ish years as Michael Keene student, I think. Man, bless him, because he had to put up with me for 6.5 years. You can imagine the trauma I inflicted on poor Dr. Keene.
We both got you back. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, that's another story. Maybe we'll get to that one too. But this particular one has to do with granulation that Andy brought up. And so I was talking with Dr. Keene about some different kinds of things I might want to do. And he had mentioned, you know, what you're doing sounds like you might need some granular sounds in your piece to kind of make this layer kind of pop. It's got some motion and life in the background, but it's not necessarily taking the foreground and the forefront of the information that the listener is perceiving. And I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Can you recommend like any granular modules or things? And he's like, okay, let's build one. And we started by building it in C. So we were doing C sound kind of granulars, so just again to get like the fundamental concepts of some things, which, you know, again, nowadays having that foundation, I open up any kind of granular patch and I'm like, oh, I think I see how this works. I think these are the control parameters. This is how I'm going to manipulate this and that. But I'm so thankful that I don't have to build a granular from scratch. Granular module from scratch.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of some of the tech stuff, could each of you talk about the two pieces that we have on the program? Jamie, Riddle Me, and Andrew's Signpost, either or.
I can start this, maybe.
Go ahead.
Okay, all right. So Riddle Me is a relatively short commission. It's 4.5 minute piece. And I had been looking forward to using some sounds for a while. I actually have to buy most of my sounds right now. I would love to do a lot of like, go hunt them down, create the perfect synthesized sound. But right now the reality is, again, with like many things going on at the same time, I also don't buy bare cane and whittle it into the perfect bassoon reed. I buy something that's already close to what I want and I finish it. And so I had been looking at the sound library on a sound effect. It's just the Wings library, and I have loved it for a really long time. And they have dragon wing flaps and gargoyles and fairies fluttering. And I used the commission money to buy a bunch of libraries, and Wings was kind of the crown jewel of that. And so I like to say that Riddle Me sounds a little bit like what happens when a dragon lands in a concert hall, and doesn't scare everybody, but it does have a lot of fluttering and flittering sounds. And it's also based on riddles from different stories and things like that. So one of the main things that happens during the piece is the max patch is triggered by keys on the keyboard. As you type, it will play short, medium, long sounds, and depending on where we are in the piece, it will also stretch and compress them as well. So playback is kind of variable. And each person is using a different riddle to guide what is being typed. And so there's the riddle from the middle of the maze in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. And there's one about maps, because almost everything I've written for the past 3 years has somehow been about water. I don't know how. I do know how. And then there's another one, and it ends with one of my former students asking, how is a raven like a writing desk? And is kind of manipulated, vocoded, synthesized, pitch shifted, as many things as I could do to make it not sound exactly like Mickey. But I had 3 students record who, what, where, when, why, how words, and then Mickey also recorded the full riddle for me as well. So I try to bring a fair amount of humor to my music, because the other side of my writing is I write a lot of really dark and heavy stuff.
Yeah, your dramatic works are particularly taxing emotionally.
Yes. Taxing's a really cute way of saying what's wrong with that girl and who's her therapist. And so I do tend to have some really lighthearted pieces as well. So one of the pieces that the Blank Experiment is going to do, I didn't even know they were going to do it until, I think Drew asked me while we were at the Midwest conference.
At Midwest Band and Orchestra Conference, yep.
Yeah. They were there promoting the Blank Experiment and Michelle's work as a photographer, and they were like 1 aisle over from us. So we got to hang out a lot. The week that we announced the mini fest, it was a lot of fun. So Drew was like, hey, can we tack on 901 Rush to this as well? And 901 Rush is like my biggest joke piece. It's the most hilarious little at the premiere. A friend of ours who was also in the master's program, he walked up to me. It was the longest composers forum we'd ever all been to. It was over 3 hours, and my piece was 30 seconds in between 2 15-minute kind of walloping pieces, and I just had this little puff of sound for 30 seconds. And so afterwards, Mihai was like 1.5 feet taller than me. He walks up to me and he goes, Jamie, your piece was like this little ray of sunshine. And that is the best review I've had in my entire life.
Put that in your bio.
I would if my students wouldn't call me on it not being in a newspaper, because I'm an entrepreneurship teacher and I must do what I teach. But yeah, that the humor kind of comes across for me in the background of Riddle Me, because it doesn't sound like a joke other than the fact that it has wings. You can't really hear the riddles other than how is a raven like a writing desk, but it plays to my whimsical side quite a bit. Andrew, talk to us about Signpost.
Yeah,
tell me about the piece I'm playing next week.
I know. Interestingly enough, most of my output is somewhat whimsical, and this one doesn't necessarily fall within that context. So Signpost is, I've honestly had an idea to do something with this title and generally this kind of process that I'm exploring for about 7 years. So the title Signpost, obviously there's a bit of whimsy there because I love punny titles. Instead of signpost, like from the intro of the Twilight Zone, like, you know, here's pointing your way to where you're going, it's SINE with the little adjective dot, right, and post at the end. And part of this is exploring what I learned from Dr. Lilios in terms of how she thinks about structuring some of her pieces in terms of having these pillar moments, these signposts, if you will, that happen throughout the piece to create a sense of continuity and trajectory. And infusing that with the things that I really like about my music right now, which is the variability from one performance to the other. I'm no longer interested in creating the like artifact, the definitive performance of a particular piece. And so I will purposefully infuse some degree of aleatory within every one of my compositions. There's some degree of flexibility and some degree of choice that the performers make during the performance that will make every performance of a piece that much more distinctive. I once had a student who was performing in a choral piece that I wrote, raise their hand and they asked me, this is the best question ever. Dr. Smith, could you explain this one passage here? I just want to make sure that we're performing it right. And without missing a beat, this is probably the best moment, best answer I could ever give in my life. It's all downhill from here. I said, I would much rather you perform it well than perform it right. And here's what I mean, because I do think those are actually kind of different things. And boy, you know, every performer that I've talked to and interacted with loves that kind of flexibility, that kind of space to do what they do best and kind of express and interpret. So a lot of what Signpost is going to be is kind of this limited aleatoric maze, what Jamie and I usually refer to as kind of labyrinth scores, where, you know, you have these modules kind of stealing a la Stockhausen, the Klavierstück 11, where you got these different fragments and you can play them in any order. There is a particular order to my piece, which is the labyrinth structure. There's kind of a maze that you kind of work through.
Choose your own adventure, trademarked by not us.
It's trademarked. We can't use that. It can't be a choose your own adventure score for copyright reasons. So looking at the materials and how they unfold, basically it's all of these very improvised aleatoric gestures to things that are triggered at fixed time points or triggered by the performers at fixed times. So it's this balance between what is rigid and what is flexible. And as far as the sound sources go, for whatever reason, I've been listening to a lot of bassoon multiphonics for over a decade. And to be honest, bassoon multiphonics.
The sass is not appreciated.
I don't know. There's no sass here. Who's sassing? The low instrument multiphonics, like the woodwind, the bass clarinet, the bassoon, the bari saxophone, like these low instrument multiphonics particularly resonate with me, pun intended. I have an affinity for them because of how much harmonic content is within the audible range. It just sounds really good. So a lot of what's happening, you know, in and out of these signposts are these bassoon and clarinet multiphonics that are presented in their kind of original form, but also resynthesized in their Fourier transforms, kind of all these sine waves, right? And there's that sine, there's this SINE again, right? And how those sine waves are then manipulated to create other sounds and how those interact with the live performer. So that was probably a longer answer than any of you expected. And Jamie, I promise the score will be to you before we actually have to play it.
I like that the two Andrews are exploring multiphonics in their pieces that are being premiered at the Minifest. So you'll hear a lot of that from the blank experiment.
It's important to have a thread of continuity between the Andrews.
Of course. And multiphonics at Bowling Green, just side by side there.
Just fits. Oh my gosh. Y'all have offered a couple of moments of wonderful moments you've had as students at the university, which you've said directly inform your own theory or technology pedagogy and what you do now. I want to focus in on that pedagogy and contemporary music, and I want to ask, how has contemporary music shaped your teaching, and what have you learned about teaching new music, especially to newcomers to it?
All right. Andrew, you have to go first this time because I think you will go on and on forever if you are not waiting for me to answer next.
I don't know whether to be offended or to be absolutely thrilled that I married someone who knows me so well.
There it is.
So in terms of going to BG, I mean, I still consider BG to be kind of like a Midwest new music mecca of sorts, where a lot of people kind of go to experience kind of experimental musics and different types of sounds and different types of philosophies. It's a great place for that. I think the biggest thing that I took from my experiences there and brought back to Fredonia, which I've been a part of this community previously. This is where I got my undergrad. And moving back, I was reminded that there is a new music community. It's a vibrant new music community, but it is not the same. And so having the experiences with kind of the outreach programs that happened at BGSU, where the masters and doctoral students would go perform a concert at the Toledo Museum of Art or in various churches around Toledo or BG. Or
the doctoral program at BG just went up to Interlaken to work with the high school students
amazing
there, and record some of their pieces. So it's still going.
this outreach and this ability to present, in some cases rather challenging and esoteric and philosophically abstract musical performances or events to people who don't necessarily have that same apprehension or understanding or consideration of music, right? As maybe some of the people in the contemporary music program do. That experience, I think, was incredibly vital to give me a toolbox of things to kind of bring out and explore while teaching at Fredonia. And I'm happy to say that it's not necessarily because of us, I think, but because we are here. I'm assuming it's helped, I'm hoping. It's always better than the alternative of it hurting, but I think we've helped kind of create a culture around excitement and enthusiasm for exploring new sounds and new ideas that I think a lot of our students really, really get into.
Yeah, we regularly have between 200 and 250 at student composers concerts who are hooting and hollering, and like if the percussion studio shows up, that last concert, man, they were there. And that's a pretty regular occurrence because there's a composer in almost every studio, and if your studio mate is having a premiere, well, that's an exciting thing to have. And so the culture here is really it's really embracing, and it's been, there's different vibes to it each year, but on the whole, even when I present some of my weirdest stuff to freshmen, like, you wrote this? Cool. It sounds like the soundtrack to my nightmares, but I like you, so I'm willing to give it a try. And that's quite literally something that came from one of my music theory for music theater kids classes was, this is terrifying, but I really like you.
Well, I think that's the core of the issue, right? The idea of, at least for me personally, aesthetically, philosophically, like, what is music? I don't actually believe music is like a physical thing. It's partly a physical phenomenon, but it's actually more of an abstract concept that is only formed in the mind of a human, right? I have this thing on my website with it's the intersection between the creator, the interpreter, and the listener, right? And in that Venn diagram, the intersection of all those things, that's where music actually exists. But when push comes to shove, the person that has the most control in that nexus is the listener. They get to determine what they consider to be music and what isn't music. And that's why somebody can listen to the same recording of something that somebody else loves and they can hate it and not consider it music. And I think remembering that music is actually communication, and in some cases compromise and connection, I think that if we're bringing that to not only our students, but to the communities in our various areas, if you frame it in the right way,
yeah,
you'll be surprised what kinds of things people latch onto and why. Case in point, sorry to take us back and on another tangent, like my senior recital at Fredonia, I had a 12-tone composition on that recital, and it was for solo violin. Everything else was pretty more or less straightforward neo-romantic things, but that one 12-tone composition was my grandmother's favorite piece. Okay, so again, that moment and a whole slew of others that happened subsequently at BG really helped to kind of galvanize my understanding of that concept of communication and how to get people excited about stuff that they don't know is even happening in the grand scheme of things.
I think our general premise, and this is I think partially the way the two of us have had conversations around music, have talked about education, yes, but also we're concert presenters in certain circumstances. Right now we have not done much, but the main thread
in wait a minute, we've done some. We give faculty recitals here. That's close.
That's true. Okay, fine. I stand corrected. I sit corrected. But one of the main threads through all of those conversations is that we are ambassadors for new music. And in every one of those circumstances where somebody prejudges a piece and walks up to me and says, I hated that, I'm like, okay, cool, thanks. Let's talk about it. If we let our egos reign and we are immediately injured by that form of rejection, it is hard to have a conversation that brings them back to the concert hall the next time. So in our listening lists for our students, in our oral skills classes, we pretty much always treat the conversation surrounding new music as this is a moment to say, you're allowed to have your feelings. You're allowed to have I don't like this. This sounds like broccoli tastes. I know you love broccoli, get over it. That face. Those moments are actually some of the most critical to creating an audience for us in the future. And if they trust you enough, if it's a random person who's walking up to me after a concert and they say they hated it, then I often don't have the opportunity to steer that conversation. But if it is a vocalist who just loves Puccini in my oral skills class, 100%, so do I. I'm an opera composer. That's one of the main things I do throughout the year. Couldn't have life without Puccini. However, don't you also agree with me that maybe Puccini doesn't reflect the world as we've experienced it for the past 2 years? If you had to make a playlist about the world over the past 2 years, would it sound like Puccini? And maybe the deadly illness, yes, but maybe there's some other stuff that better represents there's something that better represents that, and that's the world the sound world I'm trying to create. So contemporary music is in every class we teach, whether the students want it or not. It's really not up to them. I have a curriculum to get through.
Well, I joke with my students that basically, all right, come on in, time to talk about stuff that I love and maybe you're here for.
Actually, one of the best moments I had was this past summer. I taught middle schoolers in a group of 20 for the first time. And it was one of those other steep learning curves where I probably should have been better prepared for that hill. And I was teaching them music theory, and they did not want it from day one. There was one kid in class who wanted it, but he thought Dr. Smith taught it better the 3 weeks before. And that we were not quite prepared yet for Professor Sampson. And middle schoolers, they like what they like, they don't like what they don't like. He spent a few days trying to correct me, and then I was like, look, I got 2 master's degrees at the same time. It was a dumb idea, but I got them, and you're not there yet, so just let me teach my class, and if you have questions, feel free to pitch in, but please don't try and correct me. So other than him, the 19 other students spent 3 weeks going, no, we don't want to know this. We don't want to know. I'd like to read my fantasy book. I'd like to draw cartoons. And that, classroom management, I'm constantly shutting those down in a good way to keep them engaged, be a good ambassador. And on the last day, I kind of lost it. Because my grandfather had just passed and I was not in the mood to teach middle schoolers, shockingly. That's not the mindset, but it was our last day. So I went to class and I spent the entire class pre-framing the why of music theory. And I made them listen to an old clip. My grandfather had been on television. He was in a TV show from 1955 to 1982. And it is not like any TV show you've seen. It's not like the kids shows that run now. He was this character that did live illustrations. He had a funny name. And I showed them a video called Teddy Bear Picnic, which has become popular again because of TikTok last fall, my God, of all things. But if you go into the woods today, you're in for a big surprise because today's the day the teddy bears have their picnic. So I played them this and they were creeped out because it's this black and white 1950s. The teddy bears are creepy. Okay, they were not today's teddy bears. They were a little more well-worn. So, we had a conversation about respectful conversations when you don't know the context of the situation. We listened to the thing and then I said, okay, here's the why. Here's your music theory why. This is the last thing we're doing. Someday, this is going to show up in one of my pieces of music. And you 20 people are the only ones, well, now the podcast listeners are too, but you 20 people are the only ones who are going to know why this is here. And if this hadn't happened, maybe it wouldn't be. But you have to dig into those deeper layers. And they all left with I can't say all. I don't know that all is the right demographic description, but most of them left with a deeper understanding of the why and why Shostakovich writes the way he does. We love Shostakovich, but they didn't know the story. They liked me by the end. They tolerated me by the end. They were willing to go in that extra level. But this is the level of ambassadorship I think we need to carry every day, even when we are not in the mood for 20 middle schoolers. That was a long answer.
It's a great answer. I taught or TA'd for Theory 4 last spring, and all of that was just exposure for new music, and it was such a joy to hear students love it, hate it, so anywhere in between. It's always well intentioned, and having those conversations about why is always very fun. Pivoting away from the academic side of things, you both have started a publishing thing. I don't really know how to describe Adjective New Music, but your collective.
Then we did it right.
Yeah, your collective of fun, amazing people is always a blast to go through that website once every couple months. So how did Adjective get started, and what makes up this collective?
So Adjective is a weird little business. I like to refer to it as an umbrella because it started as a way for us to pool all of our information. Because when I just graduated from Bowling Green in 2010 in a recession, I had 7 part-time jobs. Some of them were performing, some of them were teaching for a week at Perrysburg High, or for an hour at a time at Perrysburg. I'm sorry, it was the junior high in Perrysburg, giving private lessons or group lessons to their bassoonists, starting 6th graders on bassoon. It's my favorite job. Middle school groups, no experience. Middle school bassoonists, I got this. So we started Adjective in 2010, and it was an umbrella for everything we wanted to do musically that doesn't fall under regular tax already taken out income. And it was a way for us to make money together. We've done a number of things with it, and at the moment it functions as mostly publishing company and distribution hub for a number of self-published composers. That's the way we like to describe it. We have ballooned out to do concert production in the past. We still have some partnerships that are active that I'm sure in the next 12 months will become more active again. We've got some new partnerships in the making. We, speaking of partnerships, added performance partners about a year ago, maybe a little bit longer. I have no concept of time anymore. My favorite question is, when am I? I don't know. Is it Thursday? But yeah, so we started it in Bowling Green, and we started it as a huge question mark. And I really think that it sort of continues to function that way, but we get to do it with a lot of really wonderful people. The collective started in...
I have to interject more. I'm so sorry, but you talked about how we started in Bowling Green. What was our first major project, and what was the thing that encouraged, that's the right word, encouraged us to file all of the documentation to become an LLC? Do you remember, Jamie, what that project was?
In 2010? I don't. Wait,
On
really?
the spot.
Bassoon multiphonics.
Well, yeah, okay, but that didn't happen for another 4 years.
It was your book that,
Yeah. I mean, I think we have forgotten. We have long forgotten when we initially decided, like, we are going to run a publishing company. We're going to self-publish it. We retain the most, all composers retain the most profits if they self-publish. It's a harder marketing road, but it pays off really well in the long run, or at least that is the concept. And so, yeah, I don't remember why we decided to self-publish my book too. That seems like such an audacity move. I think it's because both the bassoon world and the comp world are easily accessible for us. We decided to go ahead and do it, and promote that way.
Yeah, we didn't need the same kind of marketing platform that Stephanie Myers needed for Twilight, so I think self-publishing was fine for us.
Speaking of 2010. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so that project was actually, our first interns for Adjective were all working on my book. We had 6 of them over 2 years helping analyze all of the pitch content for bassoon multiphonics. Speaking of multiphonics that have way too many pitches in them, like Barry, bass clarinet, bassoon. We actually had to put a limit on it. Like, once you get 40 or 50 pitches deep, you gotta stop. Yeah, so that was one of the big projects that we kind of rallied around early on. Yeah, this is a messy answer because it's a messy definition to our business. But when we moved to Fredonia, we stopped giving concerts. We had been doing this kind of mini series, not TV show miniseries, but series of concerts. It was only 2 or 3 a year up in Toledo, and we were hitting a good stride with it. And then we got the job offers from Fredonia and decided to pull up stakes and go. And there's not as many students for me to teach on bassoon here. I had a huge studio in Toledo. It was amazing. There's a very different atmosphere here for the business, and therefore we shifted away from it. And we were also kind of tired of telling people, oh, hey, yeah, I'm self-promoting myself by my scores, my husband's scores, and my book. it started to feel a little, that's the best word for it. And so we really wanted to create a community of composers where I don't have to self-promote, because if you call me and you're looking for something by me that's for an instrumentation I don't have, dollars to donuts, one of my friends does, one of the members of this wonderful collective. And so it was important to us to create a community more so than a business. In fact, we had a lawyer look at our contract and he was like, and you're nuts, you're not going to make any money. I was like, cool, great.
That was a 100% good sign that we were on the right track when we had, because I mean, as far as the legal things were concerned, he was like, yeah, legally this looks great. But did you plan on making a lot of money with this? I'm like, well.
Oh, so yeah, it's a little bit of everything. Have I missed anything, Andrew? I mean, like how it got started, I think I sort of covered. And what are we up to? What is the collective up to? Do you know?
I think there are 19 in the collective, if I remember. I think it's us plus 17.
Oh, is that the kind of up to we're counting? I thought we were like, what are we up to? Not like,
what are we up to?
How many?
Like, what is our activity? Like, what are we
there
doing?
It is.
No, I mean, that's I know basically that's where Adjective is right now in terms of like who we represent and what we usually do. It's probably likely that within the next few years, we're going to start doing more in the concert presenting realm again. We're starting to look into some partnerships with some local venues and things, and maybe putting on, concerts or events curated specifically around the music of the composers within our collective.
I'm not gonna lie, I get a lot of pressure for the first Adjective festival. I'm like, you show me the hours in the year that I have to plan this thing, friend. You show me where they are.
As Andy well knows at this point, planning a festival is not for the faint-hearted.
It's not.
Nope.
It's not.
We're going on 11 and a half months of planning, and it's next week.
And there's about 40 threads of things that you probably feel like you have to collect and attach over, as soon as we're
where to store a harp.
Yep. Yeah, there's that. Things you never thought you'd have to solve. We did have a really amazing foundation for this business. We didn't jump into it and just say, we're going to do this. It was, we had,
although it feels that way sometimes, not gonna lie.
Shush you. We had multiple internships each. I started with Syracuse Symphony in 2004. We both did Glimmer Glass Opera internships where we learned a fair deal about how to logistics everything. And I use that grammatically incorrectly on purpose.
Including how to store, transport, and safely unpack a harp. So, Andy, I might be a very, very helpful for you in this festival if you need an extra pair of hands.
Just don't do what I did.
My saving grace, Andrew.
Just don't push the harp upstairs too quickly and nearly break your boyfriend's ankle. Oh, he has frozen. There you go. Okay. He's back. Yeah. So we had a fair amount of kind of nonprofit, medium to large size organization experience when we dove into it. We also got a lot of opinions from people on how self-publishers should function, and some of them were extremely valid, like bar line better than staff lines, except in Finale, Sibelius, Dorico, or any notation program ever created. Solid piece of advice that I never ever would have thought of. Other things was, it's really hard, you shouldn't have to do it. You should find a publisher. And that those type of people, we just, we nodded politely, we were good ambassadors, and then we went to an amazing lecture with Jennifer Higdon, Alex Shapiro, and Stephen Paulus, where they taught us way more in 3 days than most schools still offer in entrepreneurial activities. It's not part of the curriculum yet at most schools. I'd love to be the change there and start stimulating more conversations about how it can be adapted across a curriculum rather than just a couple of classes. That is one of the hills I will die on. That is one learning curve, one hill I will run up over and over again, because I think you deserve to know how to survive in a post-pandemic economy. And I think graduating into the height of a recession made me super sympathetic to everybody who is graduating right now with absolute economic uncertainty ahead of us. Like, what is going to happen over the next few months? I don't know. I don't know at all. All I know is adaptability is key. Diversified income is essential. Knowing the difference between active and passive income saved my life. Those types of things are bare bones and they're so necessary. Dramatic pause.
Dramatic pause. That was just like solid ending, like you were reading that from a script.
It would seem so, but I'm definitely not.
For sure. We're all so incredibly looking forward to the festival next week, to have you here and to have the blank experiment here, and to everybody listening to this podcast right now who is definitely gonna come to BGSU March 24th through 26th.
Yes.
Be there or be square, folks. Thank you both online.
Or be online.
Or be online. Yeah, exactly. Thank you both so much again for coming and sharing this conversation with us today. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to chat with you.
We cannot wait to be there in person.
Yeah, not too long. We're a week out, folks.
7 days.
Danger. Somebody get the oxygen ready for Andy.
Oh yeah, I need it. Before we send off, what is one thing that you both are looking forward to at the mini festival?
Oh, Andrew, you go first with what's on the mini festival. I'm thinking about food.
Dang it, because I saw Stone, right? Stone's Throw is on the
Stone's Throw is on there
somewhere. Yeah.
Grumpy's has moved to Bowling Green.
We're gonna seem like such weird composers, but to be honest, that was one thing we really missed about moving from Toledo to Fredonia. Fredonia is a lovely place. It doesn't have a lot of, shall we say, the culinary delights that exist in even Northwest Ohio, even in BG, right? So not gonna lie, performing is gonna be a lot of fun, but having those formal and informal get-togethers that are at the ends of the days of the festival, where we can, go out someplace and grab a coffee or a tea or a beverage or meal with anybody who's at the festival, that's the thing I'm most looking forward to.
Honestly, from all of the new music festivals we attended, those are the most memorable moments. I can sort of remember performances. I remember one particular performance. I was angry the whole time. Like, I remember that one. I remember one I was absolutely delighted by. I remember a bunch that I performed on, including the time I left stage and they were like, we didn't hear a note you played. Why'd you work so hard? That's true. 3 people told me. Don't double the bassoon and the trombone for a whole piece, y'all. Just give me a moment. Give me a moment. Anyways, I remember a lot of those performances, but more so, my God, the best stories that we still tell did not happen on stages. They happened in amazing conversations in the lobby, co-backer lobby, or at it wasn't Stone's Throw before there were 2 Foxes. There was an Italian restaurant that we all used to go to. And I can't remember the name.
I'm not going to remember. I'm going to claim age on this one, and I shouldn't, but that's what I'm going to do.
You can. It's all right. We're close enough. We're close enough to calling that. But yeah, those are I can't wait to talk to everyone, to catch up with some old friends, and to meet all of the students there, including checking up on a student of ours that we have sent to Bowling Green. And we cannot wait to see her again.
She is super excited to play on Riddle Me.
I can only imagine. I can't wait. It's gonna be one of those things where she studied with me so frequently that it's not like wrong environment. I'm not gonna recognize her, but at the same time, it's gonna be like, hey, we're in the wrong place. Except we're exactly where we're supposed to be, because this mini festival is going to be wonderful.
We're so looking forward to it, and we hope everyone listening can join us online or in person. But thank you, Andrew and Jamie, and we're signing off the podcast.